My mom died in March 2020, and then kind of, the whole world stopped, and I struggled with the grief and then COVID and just the division in the world. And I just remember my mom saying to me throughout my life, reminding me of the goodness of the people in front of you and individuals.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your host, Kate Bryan. The One Girl Revolution podcast highlights the stories of everyday women who are changing the world through their lives. Please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl, REVO. On YouTube, we're at One Girl Revolution, and you can find all of our social media links, podcast episodes, videos, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com. A big theme of this week's episode is that we all want to be seen, heard, and known. You'll hear about Artspoke, an incredible organization that is working to instill that within children throughout their programming and camps, but this theme got me thinking about all of us. Each and every one of us, at the heart of who we are, at the heart of all of humanity, is that we truly just want to be seen, heard, and known. I think about social media and all of the things that we're dealing with and struggling with on a daily basis. But at the heart of that, we just want to be seen. We want to be heard and we want to be known. And it's really up to each and every one of us to know that about humanity, to know that about the people around us, and to see the people around us, listen to them, hear them, and know them, get to know the people around you. So I was so inspired by this. It really challenged me to look at my own life in a new way, and I hope that it does the same for you. Today on the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Hadley Wuertz. Hadley is a woman who has lived many lives and now serves as the executive director of Artspoke. Hadley's mom founded this incredible organization, and then Hadley came on board to found a new version of this incredible organization. Artspoke is a community-based organization that empowers children, adolescents, and young adults to live authentically with courage, to lead with kindness, build resiliency, and embrace vulnerability in order to build positive mental health in our world today. Hadley joins the One Girl Revolution podcast to talk about Artspoke. She also shares about the many chapters of her life where she lived in New Zealand, Australia, and Korea. She talks about her work with an AIDS HIV organization based in Las Vegas and the summer program that she created for kids affected by HIV, Camp Courage. It's incredible. Her stories are incredible. I can't wait to share this episode with you. She shares the story of her inspiring mama who dedicated her life to mental health and making sure that all people are seen, heard, and known. Hadley's mom passed away in March 2020, but her legacy lives on through Hadley, her family, and the incredible work of Artspoke. You don't want to miss this incredible episode, so without further ado, here's Hadley. Hadley, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to have you on to share your story and talk about Artspoke and all the great work that you're doing. But before we get into that, I would love to start with a One Girl Revolution story from you. Who is a One Girl Revolution, a woman or girl that's touched your life in a special way?
Gosh, there's so many amazing women to choose from. But for me, I think the woman who most impacted my life was my mom. And just kind of watching her come into her own and embrace who she was and lead her life with courage.
That's awesome. I mean, moms are so important, and I don't think that they get enough shout outs in the world. And obviously some people just have a mother figure or someone who has kind of stepped in their life. But I think that mothers need to be highlighted more often. So that's great. I'd love to know, Hadley, more about you, who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your background and your story.
Yeah, so I am originally from North Carolina. My family is from sort of the Asheville area, the mountains. But we moved a lot growing up. My dad's an engineer and my mom was a minister for much of my life. And so we moved, this is the longest I've ever lived anywhere as an adult. So 5 years, but we moved every couple of years. We lived in DC and North Carolina and Vegas. And I think during during that process of growing up and kind of having to start over every 2 years, I learned a lot about myself and like, how do you step into a new situation and create community? And I kind of look at that. I looked at it as a gift that served me well as an adult. But I know that, like, obviously different experiences affect people differently, and not, some people are like, that's terrible that you moved. But I always felt like I loved the sense of adventure, and I learned so much about myself in that process and how to connect to others.
And then your moving continued when you got into college, because you went to school in New Zealand, which I thought was really interesting. How did you end up going over to New Zealand? Yes. And tell me more about that experience.
So I actually started at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which I was very reluctant to go to because I wanted to go to an out-of-state school and kind of have that far away experience. But I did so under the agreement that I could study abroad. And then my sophomore year, I went to New Zealand on a 1-year study abroad. And then my mom actually was hired separately and moved to New Zealand halfway through my year there. But she was on the North Island and I was on the South Island. So that kind of gave me the opportunity to consider if I wanted to go back to the States or stay in New Zealand. And I really liked the school in New Zealand. It was a lot smaller. I felt like I got a lot more out of that time with the professors. So it was a perfect fit for me. UNC is a huge school, and I think that wasn't really where I was at that point in my life.
And then after college, you went to Las Vegas and worked as events director at an AIDS nonprofit based in Las Vegas. Can you tell me more about that job and then how you started and ran Camp Courage? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so actually after New Zealand, I moved to Korea for a year and taught English. And then I moved.
Okay, tell me about Korea. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So Korea was an amazing experience, but I remember flying in and I had just left New Zealand and it was like flying into concrete dominoes kind of. And I remember thinking, like, what have I done? And it was one of actually the things I think that really helped me grow into adulthood. I was 22 years old. I didn't know a single person in Korea. I didn't speak Korean. And I kind of leaned into that experience of moving so much. And I told myself 3 months, like the first 3 months are going to be hard, but then after that, it'll be okay. And that turned out to be true. After 3 months, I could get around. But I really experienced like the goodness of people. When I first got there, I had to go to Japan to get a visa. I had to like get on a boat, go to Japan, come back. And it was like the day after I had landed. So I spoke no Korean. I didn't know anyone. And they got me to the ferry fine, but then I didn't know, in Korea, they don't have addresses like we have in the States. And so I didn't know how to get home. And I remember like in the back of this taxi, like knowing I was close, but not sure where I was. And I was kind of crying. And the taxi driver called the school and he like talked to them and found out where I was. And then after that, he got me home. And then for like the next 6 months, I went with his family every weekend so his kids could practice English. And I don't know, just the goodness of people. So that's sort of an offshoot. But I think living in Korea gave me a huge amount of confidence that if I could go to a place where I didn't know anyone and I didn't speak English, then I could do anything. I probably had a little bit of that like 23-year-old bravado as well. That doesn't hurt. But then I moved back to the States, and my dad lives in Vegas. And so that was kind of a natural stopping point. And I was actually studying to go to grad school. And then I got a job as a case manager at an AIDS nonprofit. And I really wanted to work in that area. My mom was gay and kind of had struggled with being in the closet and being a minister and how to navigate that. And some of our close family friends died of HIV/AIDS when I was a teenager. And that kind of, I don't know, I guess it impacted me. I was at a point in my life where I was old enough to kind of have some understanding of what was going on. And so I started as a case manager there, and then I quickly was like, I want to do more. I can, and they were kind of between like development directors and events. And so I was like, I want to be the events person. And so I just kind of jumped in, and we ran two major events. One's called the Black and White Party. And at that time they were throwing that at the Palms Hotel and Casino. And so I planned a party. It raised about $150,000. And then our big event of the year was the AIDS Walk, which had like 10,000 people involved with it. It was a huge event at that time. And we raised about $500,000 for that. And so I was going out into the community, developing relationships and getting sponsors, kind of doing some education about HIV/AIDS and the stigma associated with that. But I enjoyed that. And I obviously felt passionate about the cause, but I really wanted to give back. Like, I felt like I was always asking people for things. And I think sometimes in nonprofit, it's important to remember that we also need to give. We need volunteers, we need donations, but how do we really serve the community also? Mm-hmm. And so the organization had sent kids to camp experiences outside, not through Aid for AIDS of Nevada, but through other things that were never specifically designed for kids either infected or affected with HIV/AIDS. So I decided I wanted to create an experience and fundraise for that, and that it was free to all of the kids who would attend. And this was open to kids who either they were infected with HIV/AIDS themselves or their parents were. And so it wasn't a traditional camp experience, and that's true for Artspoke as well. So we took the kids to San Diego, and it was about having them experience a variety of things. So we did, things like SeaWorld, but we also took them to the theater, and we did, traditional camp games, and we went to the beach. But really, most of these kids had never left Las Vegas, and so kind of just allowing them to have these experiences and to build connection with one another and the volunteers. And it was kind of like, it was my passion project, the thing that I actually liked the most about that job. So that's kind of how that came about. And then we moved to Oregon. It was all new things.
Well, that chapter of your life is thank you for sharing, because I think it's so important for us to talk about. And I don't think that a lot of people, or at least in my own experience, a lot of people don't talk about HIV/AIDS, and especially how it affects kids, and children. And having the camp, it must have just been so life-changing for these kids. And just to have a different experience. And I know that's similar to what you're doing too with Artspoke. Sometimes we all need to just be pulled out of whatever is happening in our life, whatever difficulty we're going through, and just have a fun life experience. And it just kind of, it takes you out of that dark shadow or that cloud that we're all oftentimes living in.
Yes. Yeah. And a sense of like normalcy and connection, I think, is super important.
Yeah. And community, to bring people together that are all having these experiences at the same time, and say, you're not alone. You have people here who love you and who are going to walk with you. Because the world can feel so isolating. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. It probably impacted me more than the kids, but it was a really special, pivotal moment for me.
I love stories, Hadley, and especially this podcast is all about stories. I'm going to have you tell me a story about Artspoke when we get into Artspoke, but before we get into that, I would love to hear a story from your work with Camp Courage. Is there a story of somebody who went through the camp that really touched your life in a special way, or maybe opened your eyes or touched your life?
Yeah, I think, I feel like my life was touched in so many ways, from the generosity of the other adults who would volunteer, but also just watching the resiliency of these kids and how they would connect to each other, and how they really looked for opportunities to support one another. We had a kid who not only had HIV/AIDS, but also had type 1 diabetes, and so needed a lot of support during the trip. And we made sure, like Artspoke with Camp Courage, we wanted to make sure that we could support kids of all needs. So we had a nurse that was with us the entire time. But just watching that child navigate and take responsibility and ownership of his life. And I have somewhat of an adult perspective of, I wasn't a parent yet, but I could see that it would be easy to see this as an obstacle to overcome or a burden, but he just really embraced life. And he was, he's 6 years old, and he's like managing and communicating his needs with his diabetes in a way that, like, I don't know if I could do as a fully grown adult. So I think just, I don't know. I think the power of the innocence of children is so amazing, and this, like, the goodness that sits there, that isn't necessarily taught, that just was within him. So yeah, that I haven't done Camp Courage in 12 years, so my story's probably I don't know, out of date, but that was the thing that stands out in my mind.
That's an important one. And it's important for people to think about that too. The courage that children have. I think about our mutual friends, Abby and Molly Steffel, and just like what they're doing with Carve Out Courage. And Molly is just such a resilient girl. And I just feel so inspired by everything that she is doing and how she's living out her life. And she's just a kid, and I'm like, I look at her and it's so inspiring and makes me want to be a better person. And so I think that kids in our lives and kids that we, encounter through these different projects and volunteer efforts, I encourage everybody who's listening, find a volunteer opportunity in your own community. And especially if it's empowering young people, because we need to support the future generations, up and coming generations, and it will touch our lives just like you shared.
Yes, absolutely. And usually you get more of a gift than maybe you're even able to give, but yes.
Yeah. And so then you moved to Oregon, right?
Yes. Yep.
How did that happen? And what did you guys do there?
So we moved to Oregon. I kind of wanted a new experience. I was kind of ready to move on from that position. And I actually, at that time, was just tutoring kids. I ran a tutoring center in Oregon, and my husband and I, we had our first daughter in Oregon. And then when she was 5 months old, we moved to Australia, and we lived in Australia for almost 5 years. And then we moved back to the States Christmas 2015. So
wow. Yeah. I hope that you write your life story at some point, because there are so many different, especially living all over the world. I'm sure that you have so many stories through all of that. And I was thinking about it when you were talking about Korea, how important it is for all of us. I know that it's not always doable for people to travel and to see the world, but I think those opportunities really touch your life in a special way and open your eyes, that we kind of can all live in our own silo. And so I think it's so important to get those experiences, and even your family being able to have those experiences around the world, I'm sure just touched your life.
Yes. I think just realizing that cultures may be different and languages are different, but people are much the same. Like, there's goodness everywhere. And there's ugliness too, but for the most part, my experience with the world and people has been overwhelmingly positive. And I think especially now, when we feel, at least in the United States, so divided, I just try to lean into remembering that actually the people we encounter on a daily basis are really amazing individuals.
Yeah. So how did you moved back to the States? How did you get involved in Artspoke? How did you end up getting connected with Artspoke?
So actually, Artspoke has been run in a variety of formats in the US and in Australia and New Zealand, because this program was created by my mom. And it was called something different at the time, but my mom was the director of wellbeing and support for the largest ambulance company in Australia. And she realized, working with paramedics, they see a lot of terrible jobs, as you can imagine, being first responders. And so her job was kind of to get them support for what they witnessed and the trauma that they experienced in those roles. And in Australia, a lot of paramedics come from South Africa. So they kind of, depending on their life experience, can often show up with like PTSD. So there was a lot of issues just with addiction and suicide and all these things. And so she was actually hired as the chaplain, and she replaced someone who was very traditional and like, hey, let's have a cup of tea and God loves you and you're going to be okay. And my mom, although she has a theological background, she also very much believes in mental health and research, and she kind of approached it in a different way. And so she created a peer support program where they trained 10,000 paramedics on how to stabilize each other if they had a bad reaction to a job. And then also in conjunction with that, the St. John Ambulance Company provided mental health services, like free 10 sessions for any paramedic and their families, and then more if they needed. So she really created this whole department. It was a different experience and a different way to support their workforce than previously they were doing. So through that work, my mom realized that like we are not equipping anyone, adults or children, with tools for positive mental health. You think about fitness, that's something that's like a lifelong pursuit, that we encourage kids to do sports young, and then we encourage those habits later on in life. But how do you create a similar situation with our mental health? And that's something that also has to be developed and supported. And so Artspoke was developed with that in mind. So how can we create positive mental health tools for kids in a developmentally appropriate way, starting at age 5? So interestingly, we moved back to the States first, and then I was pregnant and I had our youngest daughter, Temperance, and Tempe has Down syndrome. We didn't know she was born with Down syndrome until she was here. And I'm grateful for that, because I think I would have like worried myself sick. But, I went through this whole process of seeing the world in a different way. She really opened my eyes to the unique gifts that we all have to offer. And sometimes I think in our culture and in our society, we prioritize the wrong things and we only celebrate a certain type of person. And it felt like I started to see the world in a completely different way. And in conjunction with that, my mom came back to the States when Tempe was born to support me and my older 2 daughters, who she's very close with because we had all been in Australia at the same time. And my middle daughter was born there. And she decided that she was going to stay in the States, that she wanted to support me and she missed the girls. So she moved back to Stillwater, or she moved to Stillwater. She never lived in Minnesota before. And she took a job at a local church, and she asked me, would I be interested in starting this program with her and kind of being involved from the beginning? And I said, I don't think so. Like, I'm not really interested in being involved in anything related to church. I have personal faith, but I'm not really down with organized religion. And my mom is very liberal in her beliefs. And she's like, she said, this is not a religious program. It's about how we live in the world and the mental health component. And so, and a big piece of this too was creating a space for every child. So not just, the neurotypical children, but that it's a cross section of a true community and exposing all of us to each other's amazing gifts. And so that kind of spoke to me at that time. I think, Tempe was one. And so my mom formed a board and we started planning in 2017. And then in 2018, we ran our first Artspoke. And during that year, my mom was actually diagnosed with ALS. And so right before the first Artspoke in May 2018, my mom had completely lost her voice and her ability to speak. Which I know you don't know my mom, but she was like full of life and charismatic, and she had an amazing way with words. So for that was a big adjustment for her, and also the vulnerability associated with that. And so she asked me, like, do you think you could run Artspoke without me physically here? And I said yes. And several times in the year, I'd asked her, like, are you sure you want to spend your energy this way? But this was like her lifelong passion. So she actually moved back to North Carolina, where we're from, so she had more support. And she was still supporting the program and advising me during that whole time. But so in 2018, we ran our first program with only 28 kids in each week, so 56 kids total. Nobody knew who we were, but we had a really positive response. And then the second year, the program sold out in 4 weeks, and we had 80 kids. So that was 2019. And then 2020, we decided to take 64 kids a week, 128 over for the whole program. And that sold out. But then, of course, COVID happened. So we were unable to run the program in its original design. But we did some online courses just to keep people connected. And then this year, we ran the program, again, sold out to 200 kids. The thing that's really unique about Artspoke is I get a lot of credit because I'm like I'm the face of the program, but Artspoke is a community program. It's not possible to do Artspoke without the support of the community. So we train middle and high schoolers to be what we call either captains in training if they're middle schoolers, or if they're older, high school or college, they're captains. We start training them in January. They go through 6 months of training where we train them in things about like embracing vulnerability, positive discipline, first aid, and then like mental health, mindfulness, different techniques for running their group. And then those captains and CITs are in charge of running a group of 10 kids of the same age. So we split the kids up into groups of 10. Because Artspoke it's all about building resiliency and building those positive mental health tools. You can't ask a kid to be vulnerable and to step into new experiences if you don't create relationships. So we have a 2-to-1 camp to leader ratio. It's really important to us and the Artspoke board that every child feels heard, seen, and known, that they really are known during their week at Artspoke and celebrated. And we do a lot about training with the leaders, but also they do training with the kids during the week of like, how do we celebrate one another? How do we celebrate our own gifts, but it's not about comparing to other people. It's about we can celebrate the gifts of all of us. And some of us might be really great at hammering a nail, and some of us may have an amazing artistic talent that is expressed in this way. So how Artspoke works in that way is we create 5 projects in the group of 10. They each do 1 project a day, and they rotate through all 5 during the week. So Artspoke's not a place where you're supposed to be good at art or you're good at sports. We just ask that you're willing to embrace who you are and show up as your authentic self. So I joke, and I don't think this should not be the tagline, but I say there's something to love and something to hate for everyone, because it is such a vast experience that it's not everything is going to be your favorite thing, but it's about learning new skills, reaching out, connecting to other people, supporting one another as we do that, and embracing our own vulnerability. And the reason we do that is because all the research around building resiliency, it kind of has this is the recipe. So having an individual be known, having them feel connected to the community, asking them to embrace vulnerability, creating just a little bit of stress in their life, but not stress so that they are, they kind of have to reach out to other people to find support, and then to get that support by their peers and their leaders to find success. So part of that is we work with business owners. We do a variety of projects. In 2018 and 2019, we built natural playgrounds for local schools and other nonprofits, where the kids they go to these schools and they've built this gift that they get to share, and they've learned the skills, and the projects are run by professionals in that vocation. So they get a lot of experience kind of thinking outside the box of what potential careers. This is kind of an offshoot of or a benefit of Artspoke, but not the primary focus, but they get a lot of exposure to a variety of vocations, and we really like to highlight the artistry across a variety of those vocations. So they work with general contractors, they work with traditional artists, professional photographers, in 2021, we didn't do, we normally do a project where we bring in a local chef and they learn about healthy habits around eating, how to make an amazing, delicious gourmet meal, and how to serve that meal. And then we also teach the kids and like, how do you share in community and receiving the gift of a meal? Because I don't know where it is other places, but in this school district, they get about 12 minutes for lunch and there's not like a whole lot of community building. So kind of just creating that healthy space around food, not just in what we eat, but how we eat.
I'm sure that it's been so cool to see it continue to evolve, and it's going to continue to evolve from here. And there's so much work to be done. And I loved what you said about how your goal is for kids to be heard, seen, and known. That's such a human thing. We all just want to be heard, seen, and known. And so I think that's such a powerful facet to everything that you're doing. And I think everybody who's listening right now, we're all focused on social media and we have a lot to say and we want to post things. And I think what you're doing, creating community and also celebrating uniqueness. And when you were sharing about your daughter and, your mom and different things, we all have struggles and things that we go through in our life. And, we all are as unique as our fingerprint. And if we really believed that, how differently we would all live our lives. And then that goes to other people too. And so I just think what you're doing with Artspoke is so beautiful. And I just can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, it's exciting. It feels like every year there's more momentum and more support. So I feel very fortunate. This community has been amazing to the way that they've shown up and supported Artspoke and the kids here.
Hadley, I'm sure that your mom and your daughter Tempe and probably all your daughters and so many things in your life are really a moving force that fuel you to continue Artspoke and make you get out of bed every single day, excited to go hit the ground running. If you could get to the root of Artspoke and what you're doing and what drives you every single day, what would that root be?
I think it's to offer an alternative to a different way of being in the world. Not the culturally popular way. And much like Tempe's birth kind of opened my eyes to seeing, I felt like it was like I saw so much more beauty and so many more gifts of those around me. And that I'm embarrassed to say like how it made me realize how narrow minded in a sense that I saw the world and individuals within the world. And so I hope that through my own girls and through the people that are involved with Artspoke, that they see themselves and those around them and the amazing gifts that they have to offer. And especially the gifts that are not traditionally celebrated in our world. And offering, I think too, just if I can elaborate one other point is that there is a place for all of us, that there is space for every single person and the amazing, unique individual that they are, and that they deserve to be celebrated and honored and known in their community.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. And I think that we all need to take that to heart. I wish I could get that like tattooed on my arm so I look at it every single day. Yeah. And it would be such a reminder to other people, because it can be so easy to feel isolated and to feel lost in the world. And I think we all have those moments, but it's so important, just like you said, to remind ourselves, but then remind the people around us that we see them, that we love them, that we know them, and that we're listening.
Absolutely.
So I shared before that I love stories, and I'd love for you to share a story or two of people who have gone through the Artspoke program. Can you share a story or two?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece is that we're one of the few programs that offers a space for kids with unique needs. And we really go above and beyond to work with families to support those kids. And what's unique about Artspoke is that we're not specifically a program for kids with special needs, but that we really are trying to offer a space for everyone. And so I think I regularly get emails from parents with kids who attend our program who have special needs, and they tell me things like, we never thought that our child would be able to participate in programs with neurotypical kids and feel included and celebrated and just as much a part of the experience as everyone else. It's kind of ironic realizing this, but a few years ago, and we had a camper who had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which I guess this is like a theme with Camp Courage as well. But it was very scary. Everything was new, and she had a phone that was monitoring, and we have a paramedic or a nurse or a pediatrician on site every day so that we can support kids who have medically diverse needs. And anyway, she needed a lot more support, and we were like stressed because we wanted to offer her a space, and we did, but we were worried, like, if you get it wrong, it has catastrophic response for her. So anyways, the week went great. And I remember at the end of the week, her mom came up to me in tears and said, like, this is the first thing she's been able to do like normal, because we're still like trying to trust, and she needs a lot of support right now. She's learning all this. And we were super nervous, and so she was just really grateful. And the child didn't feel, I think that's important too. Like, she didn't feel that she was different. We like handled it, but she was treated like all the other kids. And then this year, so 2 years later, she came back to the program, and now, she's 2 years older, and she's managing all of this on her own. And like, it was just so neat to see her and how her confidence had grown. And I felt so honored that we were able to, kind of be at the beginning of that journey for her, and to offer her a place where she could feel support and gain that confidence. And then now she's like, I don't need your help. She was managing everything on her own, and monitoring things. So just things like that, just sort of seeing the evolution of these kids. And then also with our middle and high school leaders, like training them. And we also have leaders in our program who have diverse needs. And so it's always, I just love seeing all these individuals. And at the beginning, they have to take care of 10 elementary school kids, and that's a big undertaking. And I, being type A, like, I have to take deep breaths and know that, like, trust that they will show up and it'll be great. But just seeing them, especially this year, with COVID, and it started off, we're not even sure how to be together, and like navigating all of that, and then watching them over the first few days of Artspoke be able to really step into who they are and to kind of surprise themselves at their ability to lead a group. And so many of them said, like, I was nervous, I didn't think I could do this, and they end up being, just rock stars. It's really, really amazing to watch, to witness that. I feel very fortunate to sort of have that, just be able to observe that, I guess, and offer that space. So,
and it's going to be so cool to see all these kids go on to see like where they go from here too. Because even if you're seeing the evolution in a couple of years, imagine what their entire lifetimes are going to look like. I'm so excited to see where they go.
Yeah, I know. And have campers become leaders. I've already got kids who are like, my oldest especially, but a lot of these kids are like, I'm going to be a CIT. And I just, I don't know. It's really cool.
That's so awesome. So where does Artspoke go from here, Hadley? In your dream of dream worlds, I know that there are a lot of different things probably that you're already working on that are, behind the scenes, but in your dream of dream worlds, where do you go from here 5 or 10 years down the line? What do you hope the Artspoke is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously I would love to see Artspoke grow. We only do 2 weeks right now because it takes a huge amount of volunteer power to kind of execute the program. And I am the only staff person at Artspoke currently. So I'd love for Artspoke to have a staff and for us to be able to go into other communities and have relationships develop there and be able to offer this opportunity to other kids outside of Stillwater. So that's the hope. So we'll see what happens, but we're trying to be really intentional about how we grow so that we don't lose the integrity of the program. And also, we want those ratios of leaders to campers to stay low, because we can't ask the kids to do the things we're asking them to do within themselves and to have that personal growth if they don't feel seen and known. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So for people that are listening, how can they, two questions for them. How can they support your work? And how can they get involved if they're anywhere near you? Or maybe, there might even be opportunities that people could travel to you and volunteer or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website. It's artspoke.org. You can also email if you're interested in volunteering, info@artspoke.org. On our website, you can make donations, but we love to have people who are interested in offering their gifts to Artspoke as well. So yeah, and we're on Instagram and Facebook too. Instagram's Artspoke Stillwater, but yeah.
And I'll put all of those notes in the show notes so people can easily find your website and they can easily check out your social media. And I'll be sure to tag it once this episode is up. What can people do in their own communities? So if they're not nearby and they want to emulate just the work that you're doing, and I think on a very baseline level, what is really inspiring to me is you're seeing individual people and helping them feel seen and heard and known. What can people do in their own communities and in their own lives to emulate your work?
I think investing in the individuals in your community is something that can be done in the simplest of ways. So if you are volunteering for a soccer team, and how do you get to know those kids and celebrate them and kind of support their personal growth? I think that kind of a lot of the mindset around Artspoke could be applied in a lot of settings. We just have to have the willingness to kind of change our view as adults. I think we're so results oriented and we kind of sometimes miss these beautiful individuals that are sitting right in front of us. So I think just taking the time to invest, especially in the youth in your community, and to form those relationships goes a really long way.
Hadley, I'm so curious because you're just such an amazing woman and you've been through so many things in your life and so many different chapters. Like my mom always says that you don't have to die to have many lives. And I feel like your life is the embodiment of that. But what's the best advice you've ever gotten in your life? Or is there a mantra that you once heard that just kind of has touched your heart and you just carry it with you?
Oh man, that's a hard question. I feel like for me, so my mom died in March 2020, and then kind of, the whole world stopped, and I struggled with the grief, and then COVID, and just the division in the world. And I just remember my mom saying to me throughout my life, that reminding me of the goodness of the people in front of you and individuals. And so easy to forget that when you watch the news or you think about, the hard and scary things that we're facing in the world, I guess. And it's easy to demonize one another and to forget that we actually have a lot more in common, even if we have different political beliefs. I think there is a shared humanity that if we choose to acknowledge, I feel like, and if we can keep that in front of us, I feel like that serves us so much more than returning to our silos.
Hadley, I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom, but look at how beautiful her legacy is. It continues through the work that you're doing with Artspoke. It continues through this podcast. So thank you for sharing so much about her life and your life through this podcast. Before I let you go, I always ask this last question. And so I want to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I think I want my girls, I have 3 girls, I want them to know that they can do and be anything, and that you might have to take some knocks, but that they have the strength to do that.
Hadley, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing. And I can't wait to continue to follow and share everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.